Minnesota. Late March 2023. Winona is a small college town where life usually flows quietly. Friday mornings start the same for everyone. Parents take their children to kindergarten. Someone rushes to work, someone gets coffee. But for the Kingsbury family, this day was the beginning of a nightmare. Madeline Kingsbury, 26, a young woman working in medical research, a mother of 2 little ones. She takes the children to kindergarten with their father, returns home, and after that, no one sees her alive again. The phone is silent, messages remain unread. For relatives, this is an alarming sign because Maddi has never disappeared without an explanation. At first, it seemed that this could be an ordinary missing person, but it quickly became clear the case is much more serious. Already in the first day, the police and relatives understand that the person she feared most is involved in the disappearance. Her partner, the father of the children, Adam Fravel. Outwardly, they are an ordinary couple, but there had been danger brewing inside that relationship for years. Control, jealousy, isolation. First, he forbade her from seeing her friends. Then he checked her phone. He threatened her. He raised his hand. And once he said, "You'll end up like Gabby Petito." For her, it wasn't just a phrase. It was a warning that the next step could be deadly. When Madeline disappeared, it all came together. A massive search lasted 69 days. Thousands of volunteers took part. The entire city took to the streets, combed forests and fields. People clung to the hope that she would be found alive. But in June, hope was dashed. Her body was found in a forest belt, wrapped up and hidden next to the land of Fravel's parents. And so a personal tragedy turned into a high-profile criminal case. In the end, the court found Adam Fravel guilty of murder. The sentence was life imprisonment without parole. But the sentence did not close the hole left in the lives of 2 young children who lost their mother. This story is not just about a jealous partner and murder. It is about a systemic problem, about domestic violence, which often remains behind the doors of homes, about women who hope to the last to save the family and for the sake of their children endure humiliation and threats, about how society notices the signals too late. Madeline Kingsbury was one of those whom the system failed to protect. Her death is a warning, because every time someone says, "These are just quarrels," somewhere nearby a new tragedy begins. To understand the tragedy, you need to go back to where it all began. Madeline Kingsbury was born in 1996 in Minnesota. She did not strive for a loud career or fame. Maddi, as her loved ones called her, was one of those people who valued the simple life: work, home, children, friends. After university, she got a job as a clinical coordinator at a medical research company. The job required discipline and attention to detail, and she did it brilliantly. Colleagues described her as hardworking and cheerful, but this was not the main thing in her life. For Maddi, the most important thing was her 2 children, a 5-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy. Outwardly, everything looked like a classic young family, but behind closed doors, a completely different picture was gradually forming. Her partner, Adam Fravel, was a man with a difficult character. At the beginning of the relationship, he showed himself to be caring and attentive. But over time, his care turned into obsessive jealousy and jealousy into control. He began to decide who Maddi could communicate with and who she couldn't. He could demand a report on where she was, check her phone. This is a classic scenario of an abusive relationship. At first, little things that can be attributed to jealousy or a character trait. But step by step, the woman's personal freedom is reduced to a minimum. Communication with friends is prohibited. Meetings with colleagues after work are a reason for a scandal. The phone is always under the gun of suspicion. Psychological pressure became a constant background. Every day she lived in a mode of looking back. Any word could cause a flash of anger. Then physical violence followed. And as often happens in such cases, all this happened in silence. No one saw from the outside, and inside there was fear and tension. Madeline tried to save the family for the sake of the children. She hesitated. On the one hand, she understood. It was dangerous to be around him. On the other hand, She was afraid that a breakup would deprive her of control over her children's lives. She knew he was capable of making threats, and that was what kept her in the relationship longer than she should have. One of the most disturbing details was a threat he once made. "You'll end up like Gabby Petito." This phrase was not just intimidation, it was a signal. He was referring to a case that was discussed all over America, where a young man killed his fiancée during a trip together. For Maddi, it was a cold reminder. Her life could end in the same way. Fravel increasingly resembled not a partner, but a supervisor. He isolated her socially, deprived her of confidence, and suggested that she could not cope without him. This is one of the main signs of domestic violence. Devaluing the victim, turning her into a dependent person. Madeline's family knew that something was wrong. They noticed that she became more withdrawn, tried not to talk about her personal life, but like many victims of violence, she was in no hurry to share details. She always found excuses, explanations. This silence became a trap. In the spring of 2023, Maddi increasingly thought about breaking up. She wanted to leave, but she understood that this step would be the most dangerous. For many women, the moment of breaking up becomes critical. This is when the aggressor loses control and is ready to do anything. She knew this, but she still delayed the decision, thinking about the children, hoping to buy time. It was at this moment that the story entered its final phase. The situation had gone too far, and there was no turning back. Domestic violence rarely occurs suddenly. It usually builds in layers, like a subtle but relentless wall. Madeline Kingsbury's wall began to grow gradually, back when those around her thought her relationship with Adam Fravel was developing normally. At first, it seemed almost harmless. Fravel demanded that she text him when she left the house, when she arrived at work, when she returned. In the first months of the relationship, such requests could be attributed to concern, but concern quickly turned into total control. Over time, he no longer just waited for her texts. He demanded an explanation for every minute she was late. He checked her phone. He found reasons to quarrel over numbers in her contact list. He considered male friends a threat. Even a simple text message with a colleague could cause a burst of rage. Such episodes became more and more frequent. If she objected or tried to explain herself, he raised his voice. Later, he resorted to force. Isolation is the main tool of any abuser. Madeline experienced this herself. Gradually, she stopped meeting with her friends. She canceled meetings, found excuses. Most often, she simply said, "I can't. I'm busy." In reality, she couldn't, because a scandal awaited her at home. Fravel instilled in her the idea that all her friends were a bad influence, that they allegedly turned her against him. He created a reality in which there was no one left except him. Even Madeline's family noticed that she was becoming more and more distant. On holidays, she smiled but was wary. Sometimes it seemed that she was controlling every word, as if she was afraid to say too much. Abuse is rarely limited to words. Fravel used physical force. He pushed, grabbed hands, could hit. After such episodes, a honeymoon followed. Apologies, promises that it would not happen again. But it happened again and again. Against the backdrop of physical violence, there were threats. One of them was the most sinister. He said that she would end up like Gabby Petito. This threat was direct, cruel, and symbolic. It spoke of his intentions clearly. If she tried to leave, the same fate awaited her. Such words are impossible to forget. They become the background, a constant, cold fear that does not let go. Another instrument of pressure was the restriction of finances. Fravel tried to control her spending. He was interested in what each amount was spent on. In his picture of the world, she had no right to independent decisions. This is another form of violence, economic. It makes a woman dependent, reinforces the feeling that without a partner she cannot survive. Each of her days was divided into small periods of time that needed to be explained and justified. Any call from a friend could end in a quarrel. Any delay after work turned into an interrogation. Gradually, she became quieter, more careful, as if she lived in a cage. Her colleagues recalled that she sometimes looked tired and tense. but always found the strength to smile. This is typical for victims of domestic violence. They hide the truth, try to look normal, because admitting what is happening means facing even greater danger. By the spring of 2023, the situation had reached the point where it was impossible to stay near him. Madeline began to consider breaking up. Her thoughts increasingly returned to her children. She wanted to save them from this atmosphere of fear. But leaving an abuser means entering the most dangerous phase. It is at this moment that the aggressor begins to feel a complete loss of control, and it is then that he is ready to take extreme measures. Fravel felt that his power was weakening, and this was the trigger for the tragedy. March 31st, 2023. The morning in Minnesota began normally. For Madeline Kingsbury, this day was supposed to be just another one in a series of workdays. She worked as a clinical research coordinator at a medical center in Rochester and planned to go to work. But that day, her life was cut short. Together with Adam Fravel, she took the children to daycare. CCTV cameras recorded their car on the route. This was the last confirmed appearance of Madeline in public. Upon returning home, she stopped communicating. The text messages and calls that usually accompanied her day stopped overnight. For the family, this was the first alarm signal. She never just disappeared. At first, loved ones tried to convince themselves that this was an accident, perhaps fatigue, perhaps technical problems. But the hours went by and the phone was silent. That same day, colleagues noted her absence from work. For a woman who had always been distinguished by responsibility, this was uncharacteristic. By the evening, the family was starting to panic. Madeline hadn't picked up her children from kindergarten. This was a crucial moment. No one could believe that she would voluntarily leave them unattended. On April 1st, she was officially declared missing. The countdown began. In cases like this, every minute counts. The police immediately noticed her relationship with Adam Fravel. His behavior seemed strange. He didn't actively want to participate in the search, didn't express open concern. He seemed to be distancing himself from what was happening. The search was massive. Hundreds of volunteers, police officers, and rescue services took part. Drones, helicopters, and canine teams were used. Forests, roadsides, and riverbanks were searched. Each area was checked again and again. But the days passed, and there was no result. Volunteers recalled that the atmosphere during the search was both tense and desperate. People understood that the more time passed, the less likely it was that she would be found alive. Against the backdrop of the search, Adam Fravel's behavior raised more and more questions. He refused to cooperate with the police. Moreover, he stated through his lawyer that he would not assist in the investigation. Such a step looked provocative and suspicious. Madeline's family at that moment openly spoke about his role. For them, there was no doubt he was involved in the disappearance. They knew what he was like in everyday life. They knew about his control, threats, violence. During the investigation, the police confirmed that Fravel was in her house on the day of her disappearance. Moreover, after he left, her phone was no longer registered on the network. The car that they both used was seen in different areas of the county. All this indicated that something irreparable had happened during that period of time. Madeline Kingsbury's story caused a great public outcry. Groups were created on social networks to coordinate the search. People came from different states to help. The media covered every detail. Her face became a symbol of the tragedy. Posters with her photo hung on the streets. The public demanded answers, but the police acted cautiously. They needed evidence that would stand up to trial. With each passing day, the hope of finding her alive faded. Her loved ones understood. Adam Fravel was capable of the worst. His threat about Gabby Petito now sounded like a prophecy, and yet the family continued to hope. Even in the face of harsh reality, a person always clings to the possibility of a miracle. In the summer of 2023, the investigation reached a new level. On June 7th, a body was found in rural Fillmore County, wrapped in cloth and hidden in a forest belt. An autopsy confirmed it was Madeline Kingsbury. On June 6, 2023, the silence of the search was cut by news that changed everything. In the suburban area of Mobridge, next to a country road, workers noticed something strange. The ground seemed freshly dug, uneven. At first, they thought it was a dump, but the smell was sharp, heavy. They called the police. When investigators arrived, they quickly realized this was not garbage in front of them. There was a bundle in the ground, a body, a woman's, wrapped carelessly, hidden in a hurry. Experts confirmed the worst. This was Madeline Kingsbury, the mother who had been missing for 69 days, the mother for whom thousands of people went out in search groups, posted flyers, checked every path. The news flew around the city in hours. Forensic experts were on duty at the scene. The road was blocked. People from nearby houses came closer, stood silently. Someone was crying. It was a blow to Minnesota. Everyone had hoped that Madeline would be found alive, a detail that left no doubt. The body was just a few kilometers from the home of Adam Fravel's parents. This immediately tied all the threads of the investigation into one. He was arrested that same day. The charge was direct and serious, first-degree murder. Fravel behaved coldly. During interrogations, he repeated the same thing, denied, went into silence. He did not look into the eyes, looked at the floor. But the facts were against him. A history of violence, threats, disappearance, and now a body found almost next to his home. For Madeline's family, this was the end of the search, but not the end of pain. Another chapter was beginning, was a judicial one. The arrest of Adam Fravel marked the beginning of a new phase, the trial. The investigation had collected an impressive amount of evidence: correspondence, phone records, statements from Madeline's friends and colleagues. The picture was grim, but complete. It showed not a sudden outburst of rage, but a long history of control, threats, and humiliation. At the hearing, Fravel's lawyers tried to cast doubt on the direct evidence. They talked about coincidence, about the failure of the investigation. But the facts were stubborn. Traces at the burial site, witness statements, his own contradictory explanations. A heavy silence reigned in the courtroom. Madeline's relatives sat in the front rows. Each time the details of the violence were read out, they had to listen to it all over again, as if reliving the day all over again. Fravel was reserved, almost detached. Sometimes he looked at the floor, sometimes straight ahead. No remorse, no attempt to explain. His image in the eyes of the public was crystal clear. A man who had controlled a woman, the mother of his children, for years and then took her life. Prosecutors emphasized the systematic nature of the violence. This was not a one-off conflict, but a systematic destruction of Madeline's freedom and personality. Monster controller, that's what journalists began to call him. The jury's verdict was unambiguous. Guilty. First-degree murder. The court imposed the maximum term. Madeline's relatives cried, but these were tears not of relief, but of fatigue. No sentence would return her children their mother. But justice was restored, at least in the legal sense. Society perceived the decision as a signal. Even in cases where violence lasts for years and remains behind closed doors, the finale can be harsh for the perpetrator. The story of Madeline Kingsbury is not only a personal tragedy, it is a mirror that reflects a systemic problem. Domestic violence rarely begins with a blow. It begins with small things: prohibitions, control, hurtful words, attempts to limit contacts. Gradually, the victim finds herself in a trap from which it is almost impossible to escape without outside support. Madeline tried to break free. She made plans, looked for ways, but her step turned out to be the last. And this ending is not only the fault of one person, it is the fault of the environment, which for too long turned a blind eye to alarm signals. After the trial, women in Minnesota and beyond began to talk about the problem more often. Women's organizations reminded, the threat in the home is no less terrible than on the street. The news discussed how the state can more effectively protect victims, how to respond to complaints, how to help those who are afraid to leave. For her family, the memory of Madeline is not only pain, but also a duty. They continue to speak about her out loud so that her name does not disappear in the statistics. 2 children growing up without a mother. They will know the truth. Madeline was a victim of violence, but she fought, she tried to escape, she did not give in. This case was a reminder: silence is dangerous. Domestic violence cannot be written off as family problems. It kills, and the price of inaction is life. The memory of Madeline is a warning. Every story like this must be heard loudly, so that new mothers and daughters, caught in the shadow of control and fear, can leave before it is too late. And this was case number 99, a case where silence was deadly, and the truth was heard only when a life was already destroyed.